Good morning.
Good morning.
So I don't know, a couple months ago, there was a book of Sojun Roshi's teachings that was published. It's called Seeing One Thing Through. So it's really a nice book. And I've been reading it. And one of the things he talks about is talks about how we do the same thing over and over again. And he quotes Suzuki Roshi, and Suzuki Roshi said, according to Sojun, if you lose the spirit of repetition, your practice will become quite difficult. So if you lose a spirit of repetition, your practice will become quite difficult. So actually, I went back through Suzuki Roshi's talks to see if I could find the origin of this quote. And by the way, they're in David Chadwick's website called cute.com. And so it seemed that Sojun Roshi was paraphrasing something Suzuki Roshi said. And Suzuki Roshi was talking about Shakyamuni Buddha's practice. And he said that Shakyamuni Buddha approached practice like baking bread. So that he would make the dough, he'd put it in the oven, and he kept baking the bread over and over again until he got the perfect loaf of bread. So Suzuki Roshi said about Shakyamuni Buddha, he becomes successful in making bread, and this was his practice. So making this bread over and over again. Then Suzuki Roshi said, this kind of practice will help your everyday life. There is no harm in it, but it is rather tedious. In other words, there's no harm in doing the repetition, but it's rather tedious. If you lose your spirit, the spirit of repeating, practice will become pretty difficult. But it is not difficult if you are full of strength and vitality. And since we have to do something anyway, in other words, as human beings, we tend to want to do things. If you have to do something anyway, if you do something, you should be very observant and careful and alert. That is our way. So that's kind of the complete quote that I could find that matched what Sojun was talking about, this vitality, being observant, putting our best effort into it. So I was thinking about Ocean Gate Zen Center, and I thought about chanting. And we chant same things all the time. We have a different service every day, but some of the things we just chant daily, like Universal Gateway, I think we chant pretty much every day. So we talk about, when we're talking about chanting, especially the really long ones, like the Buddhas and ancestors, we talk about, keeping up this vitality, this spirit, while we're doing the practice. And so, if we don't have this spirit, this kind of vitality of practice, what happens is that chanting starts to really drag and it becomes difficult to do. So we renew that energy every time. And it doesn't mean that when we pick up the energy of the chant, it doesn't mean that we chant it faster. It just means that we have more kind of verb pep in that chanting. And so we stay alert. And in order to do that, we stay also aware of the chanting of others around us. So we're engaged in matching the speed of others around us, chanting in unison with other people, not going faster than or slower than the other people. So that's something that we engage in. This is this making the perfect bread. And every time we do it, we have to renew this kind of vow to do it this way, because every time we do it, it's a new time that we do it. and maybe different people or different moods or whatever, but it's interesting because it's always different. So sometimes though, we do find things tedious when we do them over and over again, like service. And even though that's true, you know, we still do it. We still come to the Zendo and we do this practice. And we do it because we make this commitment to doing this practice. We made this commitment to each other to practice together. And so we come together and we do it. And we do it regardless of how we feel that day, what our energy is that day. We just come to the Zendo. So, you know, sometimes practice can be stressful. Sometimes practice can be difficult or uncomfortable, but we keep doing the practice. You know, it's kind of like life, right? It's like sometimes life is really uncomfortable, it's really difficult, it's unpleasant. But, you know, for most of us, we just keep doing it, putting one foot in front of the other. So the foundation of this practice is what Dogen calls gyoji, or continuous practice. And he defines gyoji as a dokan, the circle of the way, this ring, this cyclical, repetitious, if you will, practice of realized practice. So gyoji and dokan, and sometimes they're put together. It's like gyoji/dokan. So Dogen says in gyoji, which means continuous practice, he said the way, circling around without being cut off, the way of practice, the way of the Buddha Dharma, circling around without being cut off, brings forth the mind of Bodhi, practice, realization, and nirvana. So this, he's saying, this practice that we do every day, or most days at Ocean Gate, this practice comes from this mind of Bodhi, this Buddha mind. It is the practice that's engendered by Buddha mind, bring about the mind of Bodhi, the manifestation of Bodhi, and nirvana. And he says, without the slightest interval, sustained practice is the way circling around. So sustained practice, gyoji, is the way circling around, dokan. So this circling around, this continuous practice, is our awakening, and it is supported by our Buddha mind, which we are endowed with. All beings are endowed with Buddha nature. And what sustains this is what Dogen calls Shuso Ito. And Shuso Ito means the oneness of practice and realization, which we've talked about before. So this circular way of Dokan and continuous practice of Gyoji are Shuso Ito. So continuous practice, the circling of the way, this is practice realization. So this remembering, this practicing, you know, is predicated upon this encouragement that we receive from our Buddha mind. I think in many ways as human beings, we are essentially optimistic, even though it may not feel that way, that it is our Buddha mind that says, do good things, try to be skillful, do this practice, do some other practice that brings about bodhisattva mind, or the mind of generosity, or this wisdom, or skillful means, whatever it is. I think all religions, many, you know, non-religions or whatever, predicated upon this idea that we are motivated to want to be skillful. We're motivated to want to cultivate wisdom and goodness. So this is our Bodhi mind. In Buddhism, we say this is our Bodhi mind. So Sojun and Suzuki Roshi and Dogen, but in a more oblique way, makes a connection between this gyoji-dokan and everyday practice in the Zendo and our everyday practice in our life. And then, you know, if we think about it, our lives are pretty prescribed for most of us. Most of us are doing pretty much the same thing every day. It's pretty much routine. Like, for example, when we brush our teeth, right? Most of us brush our teeth at least once a day or twice a day. And so we're doing the same thing over and over again. So, you know, that's pretty tedious. Like, why would we do that? Why would we brush our teeth a couple of times a day or 3 times a day or whatever? And we do it because we have faith that it makes a difference. We've been told that brushing our teeth makes a difference to our overall health, which is going to make a difference to our happiness. It's going to make a difference to our life, actually our longevity. So, we have faith in this, but, on a daily basis, you can't tell the difference. When you're brushing your teeth, you don't suddenly feel like, oh my God, I'm going to live forever. You're just brushing your teeth. But, it's also important to pay attention to brushing your teeth. So if you just brush your teeth and you don't really pay attention, like you only brush one side of your teeth, something like that, your mouth, then there's a problem for the rest of your mouth because you're going to get tooth decay. So you really do need to pay attention to some extent to what you're doing when you're brushing your teeth. And so this is true of practice as well. This is true of the practice routines that we do over and over again in the Zendo. And it's also it's also true of practice, your daily practice, the things that you do your bodhisattva about. So we come to the Zendo, we sit zazen, we do chants. And you may not have noticed this, those of you who come to the Zendo on a regular basis, but our ceremonies are basically the same thing over and over again. So if you learn kind of the basic structure of service, the basic structure of every ceremony that's going to happen in Soto Zen. So there's this way in which we really are doing the same thing all the time. Okay, so why would we do this? So I came up with a laundry list of reasons why we would do this repetitious practice. First, we repeat it to learn it. Some of us do it because we're told to do it. We repeat it to remember it. We repeat it because it resonates for us. It makes us feel good. It brings us joy. It's fun. It's nourishing. We repeat it because we believe that it ripples out, and in that way it benefits all beings. Some of us believe in this, and we do it because we think that it makes a bad situation better. That is kind of like a magic incantation that resonates with us. We think that it's created, and it will create good changes in ourselves, that it will make us wiser, more skillful, and that we believe that if we do this, more changes will come about from that. We do it because it's a mandala of community, because we come together as community, and we do this thing together in the Zendo as a group. And so we believe that is efficacious. We do it because it reflects realization. It's a kind of harmony, a dropping of self, merging together to engage in this one event. And at the same time, we continue as individuals, creating a kind of inclusion in the midst of individuality. We also repeat things because it creates new connections as we repeat them. So for example, people come, and this has happened to me, I know it happens to you all, is, for example, we repeat the Heart Sutra all the time, the Universal Gateway or the Fukan Zazengi, and you'll be somewhere and all of a sudden out will pop in your head some line that you've been repeating all the time. And there's something about that that's helpful. It's kind of like when you hear a song all the time and something happens in a lyric and the song goes through your head. I always think to myself, oh, why did that happen? Like, what's the connection here? What connection's going on in the back of my head? So that happens too when we repeat the sutras all the time. And so what we repeat becomes our practice. This effort and this repetition becomes gyoki, it becomes dokan, gyoji, and it becomes dokan. So, each moment is different. And, we feel like we're repeating something over and over again, but actually each moment is completely different. Every time I offer incense, it's completely different. Every time I come in the Zendo, it's completely different. Every time I see you all, it's completely different interaction. Every time we sit Zazen, it's a completely different thing. So in reality, there's nothing that's repetitious. There's nothing that we should view as tedious, because everything is coming back anew. So Suzuki Roshi said, but our understanding of life is very firmly based in the mechanical understanding that we think our everyday life is repetition of the same thing. Okay, so our understanding of life is based on this mechanical understanding that we think our everyday life is repetition of the same thing. And then he said, but it is not so. No one can repeat the same thing over again. When you do something, it is different from what you do in the next moment. That is why we should not waste our time. Everything is different, and that is why we should not waste our time. I was thinking when I got out of the car this morning in the parking lot, I thought about my life. You know, everything I do in my life, actually, if I think about not doing it, I think how much I cherish the doing of that thing. Because we don't know when we're going to die. We could be run over. I could be run over on my way back home after this talk. And so there's this way in which, even though I've driven up to this parking lot literally hundreds of times, I've sat in the seat and done this many, many times. You've sat out there and done this sitting here in the Zendo. We do this over and over and over again, and yet it's completely different. It's completely fresh. It's completely new. And I would miss it if I weren't doing this. So I want to cherish each moment of my life, even the parts that suck, you know, because this is my life and it's not going to come again. Each one of these moments is unique. Every moment of Zazen is different. We come to the Zendo, we do Zazen, we do the same forms. Every one of those is different. Every time I sit Zazen, it's a different experience. I have different thoughts. My body feels different. There's something different going on outside that I'm hearing. Everything is different. Even this floor that we look at, things like that, the chairs that we think, oh, they're the same chairs that they were before. The floor looks exactly the same as it did before. These inanimate objects, they are in the process of change. They are impermanent. So everything is different, and it's never, ever, ever going to be the same again. Each moment is different. So I think this is why we should cherish each moment. We should have gratitude. You know, we can't be kind of smarmy about it, but to pay attention and realize that this is the precious life that we're living. And having this gratitude, cultivating this gratitude. This is what I think Suzuki means by don't waste time. He doesn't mean do it harder, faster, better. He means just pay attention to your life. Just enjoy your life. Take a deep breath, you know, really be present for what's happening. So we want to, you know, pay attention. Don't clock out. Don't not be present for your life. And when talking about Zendo forms, whenever I kind of stop paying attention, I make mistakes. It's like, we can chant the same thing over. It's amazing. We can chant the same thing over and over and over again. But if I get up to offer incense or we're doing a chant and I start thinking about something else, which happens occasionally, I muff the chant, you know? Even something like, I find it fascinating that when we say, I take refuge in Buddha, I take refuge in Dharma, I take refuge in Sangha. If I'm thinking about something else between Buddha and Dharma, I say Sangha. It's amazing. Like, you'd think that those three little phrases be able to like just would come out of my mouth, but they don't. And inevitably, if I'm thinking about something else, it comes out Sangha instead of Dharma. So, you know, and then I say to myself, pay attention And that comes from, I think, taking the refuges, which is really a very precious activity, not paying attention to this very precious activity that we're engaged in. And then I say to myself, pay attention, Shinshu, pay attention. Dharma, 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 not Sangha, 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 you know, and coming back to the present moment, keep coming back to the present moment. So, because what we're striving for is not some kind of lockstep perfection, but we're striving for harmony, and not a kind of harmony in the sense of, you know, kumbaya or something like that. Harmony in the sense of, or some kind of Pollyanna harmony, but in the sense of that we are all working on the same page with each other. And so when we chant, we're engaged in that kind of harmony, realization, community effort, actualization. So this is that loop of practice, this dokan that's happening as we do this. Dogen said, practicing in an instant and confirming the essential point of the body and mind of birth and death as dokan or circling the way. So he says that the actualization is this loop of practice and our dedication to it. And then he said, practicing in an instant and not confirming the essential point of the body and mind of birth and death as dokan or circling the way. So we want to be practicing every moment, and we want to be confirming this essential point of this practice in our life. So, you know, because life is so precious, why should we fall asleep? And I won't go into the times that we do fall asleep. Sometimes you have reasons for disassociating or not wanting to be present for our life as it's unfolding. But by and large, that we be present for that. Our being present for the times when we don't want to be present, and that we know that we're not being present. And that's still being present, by the way. So, you know, Dogen says in Genjo Koan, when Dharma does not fill your whole body and mind, you think it is already filling your body and mind. When Dharma fills your body and mind, you understand that something is missing. So, you know, when we make our best effort to pay attention, when we really presence ourselves for our lives, we see that our practice requires of us that each moment that we're present. So we're never going to feel like we're filled up, because in a way that has a kind of arrogance to it, like, oh, I know how to do this. I've got this. Even a little thing like doing the refuges. Clearly, I don't know how to do this. I haven't got this, you know? So I'm not filled up with that. Every moment is a renewal. Every moment is paying attention to what's happening. And it doesn't have to be like some kind of heavy duty thing either. It can be very relaxed, this paying attention, this kind of vitality. So, you know, what I thought of was about driving our car, our daily practice of driving a car. Most of us drive pretty much daily. And, you know, when we drive, even though we're going to the grocery store, right? If the same thing we've driven, same road we've driven over and over again, it's really clear that things are constantly changing because there's other cars on the road, they're different cars, it's not the same people, things are different, etc. So, you know, we have to make this commitment every time we get in the car. We've made this commitment to follow the rules of the road, to pay attention to what's going on around us. And we don't even think about that. We just do that. But you have made this commitment, because if you hadn't made this commitment to do this, you would have an accident, or you wouldn't make it to the grocery store. So unconsciously, maybe when we learn to drive and we, you know, internalized all of those rules of the road and all that stuff. That's that commitment. We made that commitment that we're going to actually engage from that position. This is Bodhisattva practice. This is that practice of I'm going to be aware of what's going on around me. I'm going to compensate, if you will, compromise, harmonize with what's going on in my surroundings and respond from that place. I'm not going to respond from the place of, well, the road should be empty and therefore I can do anything I want to do on my way to the grocery store. I can drive on the opposite side of the road if I want to. I can do whatever I want and everybody's supposed to get out of my way. Or the road's just supposed to be empty. So we know it doesn't work that way. So we've made this commitment partly out of sort of a utilitarian logic of, it works better that way. But that working better, we shouldn't dismiss that because that's Bodhisattva practice as well. This way in which we really want to fold our effort, our paying attention into the totality of our experience. So please pay attention as much as you can. Please appreciate the fact that each moment is completely new. And let's all go forward together and practice. Thank you.